Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jason Tucker, and this is episode number 220 of WPwatercooler.
Wow.
Yeah, today we're going to be talking about remote work, how you can do remote work, how people like the folks that are on this panel here are doing remote work or are employing remote workers. So we're going to go start talking about that today. So let's go around the room real quick, get everyone introduced. Anthony, you're in alphabetical order.
I'm Anthony Grant. I work for Lyft UX. I do front end development. I've been remote working with them for about 5 years. The whole time, the whole company's distributed.
Cool, awesome, good to have you on. Chris, you're muted. Please.
Yep. Gotta find that mute button. Chris Wigwood. I'm a web developer for University of Florida's hospital, and currently in this current job, the only remote person. I'm pretty sure out of 10,000 in the hospital.
Wow, awesome. How about you, George?
My name is George Stefanis. I currently work as a remote worker for Automatic, the company behind WordPress.com. And before I worked at Automatic, almost 4 years ago, I used to work for a little company called Spec Products that makes phone cases as one of maybe 3 remote workers they had. So I like working from home.
George is in an underground bunker somewhere. We don't really know where his location is.
Undisclosed location is what we're calling it, okay?
Sorry.
Dick Cheney's next room over.
Prosper, how about you?
Hey, I'm Jason Cosper. Wow, we're getting some echo there. I'm Jason Cosper. Yeah, it's Sarah. So, Jason Cosper, I remote work at WP Engine and have for the past 5 years.
Sweet.
Awesome. What about you, Russ?
My name's Russ. I run things in Vegas around WordPress. I work at WebDevStudios, where we are an all-remote team with people in Canada, the U.S., and other foreign subsidies that will soon Brexit as well. And I love remote working.
Awesome.
So you work with Canada?
I mean, I don't know if I agree, but yes, we work with them.
So your subsidies are about to leave WebDevStudios with their own Brexit?
I think everybody in Canada just apologized, if I heard that right.
How about you, Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah Weefald. I'm the production manager, project manager person at Zeek Interactive, and I facilitate the OC WordPress design meetup, which meets the first Monday of every month.
Nice. Steve, what about you?
I am Steve Zengit. I'm the founder of Zeek Interactive, and I lead the OC WordPress meetup.
Awesome. I'm Jason Tucker. You can find me over at jasontucker.blog, and I tweet over at Jason Tucker. All right, so let's talk a little bit about remote work. Who wants to kind of give an overview of doing remote type work? Who's been doing it the longest here?
Well, I mean, I think that depends on where you work and what the job entails. But I think Steve would be a good person to start with, and jump to Chris.
Maybe well,
thanks for putting me on the spot.
And we go live to Steve. Steve,
according to Wikipedia. No.
How's the weather over there?
Yeah. Look, remote work is somebody we consider it somebody that's not. Sorry. So yeah, I'm here. Is it working?
Yeah, you're good.
It is now.
Okay, sorry. So I'll give you an example. So we've got true remote workers. We've got Aaron and Philip. Aaron is in Chicago. Philip is in Maine. And then we've got Jacob, who's sort of part-time remote worker. So Jacob works in our office every Monday, and then he works out of his home in Whittier Tuesday through Friday to save the drive time.
Nice. So remote. So when you were looking for finding someone who does remote type work, what were the kind of the requirements that you had to start? Because that might be a good idea of kind of explaining how a remote worker should actually work.
Yeah, and actually, to be honest with you, I was against remote work for a long time. I was a late adopter of remote workers, and it's only because it hadn't worked out for me very well for many years. Remote work, to be successful with a remote worker, it really depends on the worker, the employee, right? So my requirements for a remote employee is it's got to be somebody who is responsible, somebody who's accessible, somebody you can trust. Right? So there's a lot of things that go along with being remote, right? So the person has to be accountable. And part of the reason I was against remote work was some of the people I had worked with remotely in the past would ghost, to put it in Sarah's terms.
So Anthony, with you said 5 years, right? So how's that going for you?
Pretty well. I actually ended up meeting the founders of Lyft out at Front End Conference when I went down there in 2011, and they ended up doing a little bit of contract work with me. But I'm really involved in the community around where I live, so I love not having to move for work and not having to be in any specific location. We go on trips with our church and be available to run errands for people during the day. So that freedom is really critical for me and like how I like to live my life. But we've been doing it for 5 years now, and our team's only grown in the last few years. One of the biggest things for us originally was communication, keeping open communication with the whole team. When I started, I was the fourth person, and we didn't have any sort of Slack or anything like that. So I started getting everyone onto Campfire back in the day, which was really helpful. It made us feel like our room was called the water cooler room on Campfire, and we just would chat all day. But that really helped us feel more like a team instead of being separated, which I think is one of the downsides that a lot of people run into with remote work. They feel kind of siloed off, especially when the whole team isn't distributed. But now with the onset of Slack, that's really helped that.
Well, I think you brought up an interesting topic, which is what Steve was saying. When you have people all in one office, that communication gets easier. But when you have remote workers, right, you have to find a software or softwares that will let people like screen share or communicate or get everybody together for like a team call. Like you got to start finding those third-party apps, which can cost money down the road. And I think when you have everybody in an office, you don't have to. That's extra income or expenditure money that you can use elsewhere.
For sure.
And it's also really critical that, as Steve was saying earlier, that you find the right kind of people, which, I mean, from what I've experienced in the past, often means folks that have experience working for themselves, be it freelancing, running their own small business. They have the drive and the ability to work independently. They're not just going to say, I have these things to do, but no one's around, so I'll just slack off and ghost or whatever. There's these things to do. I really want to get them done. I really want to have that self-motivation, that drive that you can actually rely on the person to follow through.
And that really is the characteristic that sets a good a successful remote worker apart from an unsuccessful one, right? Somebody who is a self-starter, somebody who is willing to do exactly what George said, right? To reach out and say, you know what, I don't have anything to do right now, or I just completed the thing you assigned to me. What's next, right? You need that self-starter quality is critical.
Like a person that will step in and really own a project and not just do the parts they're assigned to, but if something looks like it's getting dropped, they'll jump on it and say, hey, this is getting dropped. We need to really take ownership of it and make sure that looking with the larger goal in mind, not just siloed in their own little cubicle.
Well, it's really being self-aware, right? Like depending on what your task is, like you're checking to see if Help Scout tickets come in, or if you're using Basecamp or something like that, or Asana. Like you're really checking those to make sure, like this is critical, this needs to get done, and then you communicate with your team. Hey, I'm jumping on this. I'm gonna need help, and just jumping into the conversation instead of saying, well, maybe somebody will fix it and I'm going to go do something else.
And I think the tools have really caught up to remote work in the past few years as well, right? We've mentioned a lot of tools on this water cooler so far, but Slack is a critical part of our of our remote situation. It's what we use to communicate all.
Yeah, Steve, you're muted.
Yeah, Steve, we lost you. But I mean, that kind of, with Slack, I mean, that brings up the point, and we've touched on it a little bit about collaboration. I mean, one of the concerns that we had when we started to lean a little bit more heavily on remote workers was we're a very collaborative team. We spend a lot of time together just trying to figure out the best way to attack a problem. And so the concern was, if somebody is far away, are we going to be able to have that same sense of collaboration? And honestly, with some tools available like Screenhero, it's actually easier to collaborate with people who are remote.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not only that, but like, you know, we work on a lot of files that are really big, you know, or like trying to email an image to each other, try to email a database export. That's kind of tough. So you get everybody working in some kind of repository that everybody can pull from, and you push your change up, it comes down, and that way everybody has the latest copy. That really keeps the team together and working on a project. You know, in an office, it's easy to just kind of have that stuff and use a USB flash drive or whatever. But when you work remotely, you can't just mail a USB to somebody.
Right.
And another thing that we really need to remember about remote work is you do lose some of the ability to just get a feel for what someone's like, what their voice is like, if you're not actively engaging with them socially as you would if like the team goes out to lunch normally when you're working in the same office. So the ability to actually get together with your coworkers if you're remote, which I mean, at Automatic, we do our grand meetup once a year where the entire company gets together. Individual teams do smaller meetups. I know WebDev has their summit, I think it is, you call it?
WDS camp.
Yeah.
WP Engine has their all hands a couple times a year as well.
Yeah. So just the ability to get FaceTime, and one thing I've heard one of our Stu West, one of the guys on Mac, say is for meeting up, there is nothing that really helps build a team like everyone waking up groggily at 7 in the morning trying to find out where you left the coffee.
Yeah, well, I can see that. I can see that. I mean, the whole reason why WPwatercooler even started was because of the fact that I was working for myself, and I needed community, and I needed a place to, you know, essentially have a water cooler for people to show up and hang out and talk. And what better way to do that than to find people that don't work at the same company, but they could still come together and kind of talk about, you know, the moans and groans of, you know, doing remote work or just being an entrepreneur or running your own business.
It's interesting how you bring that up just when as you talk about tools, because we've gone from things like podcasts and chats and Hangouts and that on a weekly basis to most of the people I used to do that with even a year or two ago. Now it's all Slack. If you want to actually talk by voice to people who don't work together, they look at you like you're on something.
Yeah.
Which,
Yeah, one of the great benefits of that too is since you're not talking back and forth in the office, you're typing back and forth. Everything's documented. So you can scroll back and when you paste a link in, it's always there. You can always search through it. There's never the miscommunication of like, well, I didn't remember you saying that. Like it's all in there. You have the complete archive of everything you said.
So
sorry, go ahead, Russell.
One of our founders at WebDev was actually on the podcast. I just dropped in the chat for you, Jason, and he was talking about the struggles he went through with, the importance of getting people together and getting that real community kind of family feel. And if you listen to that podcast, I mean, he explains many things and the struggles that he had as a company being remote working.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I do every week is our lead web engineer likes to have FaceTime, even though he's remote. So we have a half-hour video call set up every week. So then that's our time to kind of come together, talk about priorities, and just kind of make sure that everyone's on the same page. And then we also can just talk about, whatever ridiculous professional wrestling I'm watching that nobody else cares about. So you still get a little bit of that.
In the early days at WP Engine, at one point, we were actually using Google Hangouts, and I would leave a Hangout open all day long, where if someone needed me, if someone needed to kind of do a sanity check, it works well for small teams. It's not going to work when your company gets much larger, but having just even a little stupid tool like that, where it kind of acts like the like look over your shoulder, ask somebody a question. You can do that with like a Google Hangout. My CPU and my fans all day long would run like nonstop, but it was great to keep in touch with the team.
Definitely helps with that team camaraderie too.
I was going to say they have Raspberry Pis for that now, right?
When I was at 10up, they used Zoom for that. They had open office hours for 2 hours every day where people would just come in and out of the whoever's Zoom room.
Yeah, so we at WebDev, we have a thing called Zoom Us, and so our teams get together every Tuesday and Thursday, like all of our front end, back end devs, and it's just kind of collaborating, sharing tools, doing stuff like that. But then on Fridays we do a company kind of scrum where we go over like accomplishments and let everybody know what's going to happen next week, and it's just syncing everybody, getting on that same page, you know, which is very, very important in remote work.
Yeah. Even more so, I think, since some of these mixed companies like Jason and I, where most of the people are in an office and then here's the handful, or in my case, the only guy that's out on our own, trying to keep up with that can be really interesting.
Yeah, at WP Engine specifically, they've hired. We don't really have a lot of remote employees. We're kind of all based on hubs, offices in San Antonio, in in London, in Limerick, like all over the place. I'm one of the rare remote workers in Southern California, and yeah, that can occasionally be fairly interesting when it's like, oh, we're gonna plan a bunch of little trips, like the management or whatever, to like come and hang out with people, and I'm just like, oh, I'm down in SoCal. Are you guys coming down here? And it's like, well, can you come up to one of the offices? Things can get a little fun there sometimes.
But darn, you get barbecue when you do, so it's not that big of a deal, right?
Yeah, brisket.
So that means me once a month I have to go up to the office in Gainesville, Florida. It's not a bad town, but as a college child, there's no cool food to go up there for.
I mean, honestly, I think one of the biggest advantages to companies is both. I mean, if you're based in the Bay Area, I mean, you can hire from places that don't have to pay the Bay Area salaries. But I think the more important thing is that you're able to hire the most qualified people, regardless of proximity.
Yeah.
So I mean,
absolutely.
How awkward is it to say, I want to hire the best people in the world that live within 50 miles of this specific location?
Well,
find the best employees.
Yeah.
I think the other problem is once you get those best employees, like the clients you bring on, they kind of have to be open to technology as well, right? Because I think that there's that old business mindset where we want to work with somebody local so we can go see them and set up a thing, but a lot of our web dev stuff is set up through Zoom, and we have to have online calls with clients and screen sharing and stuff just to communicate with each other. I think that was a big hurdle for us as well. Like you can't just show up at our office door.
I always thought the clients were the easiest.
Well, when a company is entirely distributed, that means that you can have project managers in 8 different locations around the country, all of which could work with local clients that do want some individual face time. Just because your developer may be based 3 states over doesn't mean that they can't have someone local that they can sit and talk with.
Yeah, one of our clients last year, we ended up flying in a couple of the people to just have the initial kickoff meeting. And that worked pretty well for us, but then all the meetings after that were just online Google Hangouts.
I mean, yeah, and we send somebody I think it's weekly or bi-weekly down to Austin for one of our clients, and we send like 1 or 2 people, and they're there for that entire week, and we have that where we're meeting with the client and they can see what's going on, but the rest of the work is all remote.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of clients here in Southern California, and we do hear from some of them that they want to have a partner working on their projects that they can come and visit. It's reassuring to them that these people actually exist. You know what I mean? And I totally understand that, especially for a lot of companies that have had experiences where they've had development teams just up and disappear on them. So I completely understand that, but at the same time, I think a lot of even our local clients sometimes have a much easier time going over projects and reviewing work that we've done through ScreenShare.
Yeah. Well, what about the idea you have 24 time zones around the world, and you have this ability to actually kind of distribute out all of your work throughout all 24 of those time zones if you can kind of work it out. The people that are out there that work for your companies, that do remote work, are there a few of them in different countries that absolutely benefit from the fact that they're in some crazy time zone that is on the other side of the world, yet they're still able to work, and they're able to keep kind of the, keep the momentum going all day long between their work and their work.
I really good use of that with systems people. A lot of their systems guys were Indian based, so when things go down in the middle of the night, it was never an issue. At least on the systems team, there were a number of Indian time zone guys, and that was wonderful.
I was going to say,
customer support works well with that too.
I'm sorry.
I think that's more of a John Brown question, because I mean, that guy's in a different time zone every hour,
But I was saying the customer support works well with that too. It makes it a lot easier to have continual live chat support for users, well, at least for more a product-based system like Automatic is, as opposed to a services-based like WebDev or 10up.
Just by having the office in Limerick, in Ireland, that means that our support team in Austin can actually not have to pull like basically graveyard shift anymore. Just having those people a few hours ahead of the team means that, okay, some people may have to start at 6 a.m., but that means that there's not some guy like having to shift his whole schedule to be like a midnight to 8 a.m. sort of guy.
Well, so we have one of our support guys, Michael Beckwith, who is just a beast when it comes to support. but I mean, like he's on from like 6 a.m. and I mean, I don't think he ever signs off. I can't confirm he's ever actually shut his computer off. But I mean,
I've never seen him sleep.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That would have been creepy, but continue.
But I mean, Jose and I, we started at one time. We kind of work together, and we'll stay online if we need to. But I mean, Michael's always constantly watching, and when you're going to offer support and you have something where it's all help scout or ticket based stuff, you kind of need to have somebody watching those just in case you get that ticket that says help, you know what I mean?
Well, having somebody to watch a shift is one thing, but requiring that one guy who has to be, Thorsten Ott was another good example that Automatic and 10up both know.
It's definitely not required. He just does it.
Yeah, but then you don't want to rely on him either, because what happens when they move on?
Yeah.
Hey! Don't put that karma out there. He's not
But you need a disaster emergency or preparedness plan for what happens when they get run over by a bus,
or win the lottery.
Let's
win the lottery.
Yeah.
Thoughts become things, you guys. So when we win the lottery,
you have to play to win. Unfortunately.
So when Heidi Klum shows up in my office,
see, there you go. The power of positive thinking.
How do you guys usually structure your work days? Do you stick to the 9 to 5 or break it up at all?
I mean,
I have to.
I mean, I guess that's kind of the benefit of remote, right? It's like, let's make sure we have daily tasks and these things need to get done. But I think the other benefit is I could take an hour and say I'm going to go to the bank. I'll be right back. Come back, and I can still work, and I don't have to go back in, clock in, all that kind of stuff.
But the problem with being remote is that also, like, especially if you're working at a company that actually has people in an office, because you're an unknown quantity, like if you're online, they're assuming like, oh, he can actually do some work right now. He can dive in and help out with an activity. Or it's 4:55 here. I'm getting ready to wrap up for the day. One of our evening shift guys, swing shift guys comes on and goes, oh, hey, can you help me out with this customer real quick? And then it's like cut to 6 o'clock and I'm still kind of like trying to wrap up my day because, people don't know like, oh, he's getting ready to leave. There's none of that like visual signal.
I luck out because I have quite the opposite. We're so strict on a 9 to 5 because it is a hospital that we hit 5 after 3 o'clock. Oh, don't push it. Don't do anything that, we don't want to risk anything. So just save it for tomorrow morning. It's not a big deal.
Chris,
in our general Slack, our team is really good at communicating like, hey, I'm going to go walk the dog, or hey, I'm going to go be back. I'm going to get lunch, or like even myself, like, hey, I'm jumping on the water cooler. We just let people know what's going on.
And that's the key too.
Yeah. Just letting people know where you are, what you're doing. That way, when things do arise, we know who's available.
For sure.
And I try to keep time zones in mind. I mean, we've got team members in 3 time zones at this point. And there's one member of the team that doesn't work on Fridays. So I just, if I have trouble remembering, just to make sure I don't like hit somebody up and make them feel like they have to pick something up when they're, when it's past 5 o'clock at their time, I'll just put it in my calendar. and just be like, okay, after this time, this person is not here. After this time, this person is not here. Because at this point, you know, everyone's working different schedules, and it's really important to have that work-life balance. So I just try to do my best not to make that worse for anybody.
So we started doing this thing where we do Tuesday and Thursdays calls with our support team, and on Tuesdays and Thursdays we just let people know, hey, we're not going to be available, or hey, I took time off, and that gets reported to HR and stuff. But we just kind of always let people know, here's where we're at, and we have really solid documentation on where that person is with each specific project. So when I dive in, I know, you know, I don't have to start from zero again.
Yeah. I mean, for us, really we're much more focused on productivity and what are you getting done as opposed to how many hours you put in. So I found out for myself, I can do basically gas all the way to the floor, churning through stuff for maybe 4 or 5 hours a day at most. So I do that time, and then I spend a lot of other time on or off. I may like pop up, watch the kids for a half hour, come back, and through the evenings, I'm normally on my phone, so it's no trouble for me to respond to someone that has to ping me with a question on Slack. I may not be able to dig in very deep into code, but I'm available, which I think works better with what a lot of folks that want more work-life synergy as opposed to a hard delineation between the two.
I mean, I kind of have that mentality, George, too, the same thing where like I can knock something out in 2 hours and then take a break and then do another 2 hours. But I also have that mentality of if something came in the door where it's like, hey, we need all hands, everybody, like I'm willing to stop what I'm doing and jump right back on and get into it. But I think those breaks are kind of important, just to say, but they're like personal sanity checks, right? Like let's stop, let's take a break, let's take a breather.
You need your mental health. That's important so you don't burn out.
Well, and I think what's important, George, what you kind of bring up is, or what everybody's brought up is a good work-life balance, right? Remote work really does encourage that, right? I mean, think about the amount of time that you save not having a commute. You know, I know, especially here in LA, I commuted for years from the Valley into LA, and that's horrible. And that was pre-cell phones.
Pre-cell phones.
Most of you weren't born yet, but that was terrible. Right?
That's when the Flash was still big, right, Steve?
That was, I mean, that was 90 minutes each way. That's
your A-track, though.
That's 3 hours out of my day every day, right?
You got a lot of reading done, though, right?
Yeah, I got a lot of drinking time in.
We just need some of those futuristic cars from Black Mirror, and we'll be set.
It's called a Tesla.
Right, exactly. You know, well, we've just barely started touching on this mental health issue, and that's been something that's been going around quite a bit. You know, for the folks that are you know, on the panel here, I'd love to see if you guys can provide me with links to stuff that you've been looking at regarding mental health and working remotely and how all of that sort of stuff goes together. I know there's tons of resources, there's podcasts, there's all sorts of things, talks and everything else. So if you guys can find any of those, I'd love to put those into the show notes here at some point here, so folks can kind of dig through them and see what it is that has helped you do that same type of work and be able to survive it.
I mean, a lot of, I don't really have any resources, but if I find some, I will definitely put them in the show notes. A lot of it comes down to culture. You know, like Steve has 3 kids. Like, you know, we've got, you know, multiple parents on our team. You know, we've got people who, you know, they need their free time to spend on their families. And, you know, that being a principle that we try to base everything else that we do around, you know, that informs a lot of decisions we make about the amount of time we spend on work.
Yep.
Yeah. You gotta police yourself, build out that balance a little bit, and also kind of have a few of those boundaries that you can set up and just say, look, boss, here's what's going on, and here's what I want to do. And you know,
I don't know, Jason, have you met my boss?
It's a certain way.
What's that?
Have you met my boss? He's a real jerk.
I mean, so one of the cool things that we do at WebDev is called 5 for the Future, where we take the last Friday of every month, and that day is for us. Like, we get to work on cool products or cool plugins or cool ideas that we want to do, and that's just kind of balancing that of like, we're busy in client work today. We're gonna do this for us, which really helps. It kind of takes that pressure off that we don't have to spend every day, every month working on just client stuff.
That's awesome. Well, folks, that's about it for today. Thank you for being on the show, everyone. Really appreciate it. Make sure you go outside, get some sun. If the sun isn't out, I'm so sorry. That's about it. Make sure you go over to our website at WPwatercooler.com. Click on the links there to subscribe. We do 2 shows a week, Thursdays and Fridays. So go click on the links over there to check those out. Thumbs up. Talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.